Hey, Pastor Ray Barnett here. Glad that you could be with me here on the Oasis. As always, I wish you a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this broadcast. It's actually a nice day today, but exceptionally windy, and I'm hoping that this bug of a windscreen does its job. We don't have one of those vexing broadcasts that we had a few days ago. Anyway, about 83, but last night we were expecting or they were predicting the tornadoes and all types of stuff. So, and you know what, there's nothing really extraordinary about a tornado, right? They happen. Nothing really extraordinary about earthquakes. They happen. Nothing extraordinary about pestilences, famines, wars, rumors of wars. Don't happen. But the generation in which we live, what is exceptional is that they're happening all at once. I don't think anybody can be, I don't think anybody with a modicum of intelligence can see that we're living in some very unusual times. Again, you know, nothing unusual about breezy weather. That's perhaps the harbinger of a tornado. Tornadoes are not your average experience, but they do happen. Anyway, when you look through Matthew chapter 24 and you see the signs that Jesus talked about, that these would precede his coming, we're seeing them now. 2 Timothy chapter 3 in particular, beginning part of chapter 4, a little bit in chapter 2, signs within the professing church that there would be a lack of godliness, a departure from biblical doctrine, and so on. And we're seeing all that. We have been for a while. Just this morning I was talking to a Christian woman, a friend of mine, and I was saying to her what I've said to you, especially those of you who watch my sermons on the Time for Truth Ministries YouTube channel or on Facebook, that if in all the 45 years that I've been in the Bible, reading, studying, teaching, I cannot think of a single sign that we are not seeing at the moment. They say, well, this isn't happening and this isn't happening. It's all happening right now at once. Now, I'm not going to go into Bible prophecy and talk about some things that have to yet occur before the coming of an Antichrist and Great Tribulation, but certainly these are the birth pangs of something is coming. And by the way, and especially for our purposes here, talking about anxiety and depression, let's keep in mind that the signs of the evil that's with us today. And by the way, speaking of evil, my wife and I just got back from my granddaughter, well, one of my granddaughters' celebration. She's going from kindergarten to the first grade, and they had about a 40-minute presentation. Well, I tell you what, I said to myself, how in the world could anybody abuse these innocent children? And unfortunately, that has to go on the list as well. As a matter of fact, you can read it in 2 Timothy chapter 3. It says that the time would come that people in general would be without natural affection. I mean, if you talk about war, you usually have combatants, and typically throughout history it's been men. And the reasons countries go to war, they vary. And there are some rules of engagement, obviously, in wars. But, you know, the type of things that we're seeing, like I've just mentioned, the evil, where you have a shooter going through a school like this one. I mean, it's on everybody's mind. We all had to show identification, a couple hundred parents and grandparents that were there. we all had to show identification of who we were and validate our identity, which I think is a prudent idea, a good idea in the time in which we live. Anyway, that was a thought going through my mind. I'm just looking at my granddaughter and all the young children that were, well, there must have been 100 of them graduating, going to the first grade. And I'm thinking to myself, what possesses someone to do harm to these children? Anyway, those are the times that we live in. This is the world that we live in. And we are here to discuss anxiety and depression. I have told you in the past that to bring in the events of the day is, I believe, necessary because it's affecting you. I tell you, these things happen to me, today I was talking to someone. This is how my life goes, which I'm grateful for that, but every day I'm talking to somebody, absolutely every single day. And all types of things. And a good friend of mine, I hadn't seen him in a while, met him today, and we got talking, and he just had a stroke. And there was no real reason for it, except that what I picked up on when he said what was going on in his life in the last year was stress. All right, so using that as a backdrop, here's a friend of mine just is getting checked out now as to why did he have a stroke. They really can't figure it out because nothing's really showing up. That the obvious things aren't showing up, clogged carotid artery or whatever. We're living in very stressful times. 2 Timothy again, chapter 3, verse 1. Just know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. And perilous could be, without doing damage to the grammar of the text, as stressful. Stressful times shall come. And again, who isn't under a lot of stress today? Okay, here's the thing, and it may sound almost like I'm in a contradiction to what I just started with, but it's actually not a contradiction. For you that suffer from anxiety and depression, now remember, everybody's being stressed. People are having anxiety that never had it before, experiencing depression that never had depression before, and so on. But for those of you, and the majority of you who watch, have had this with you for some time, anxiety, depression. And the thing that you have to understand is that most things, and I just mentioned a bunch of dramatic things, but life is mostly, life consists mostly of trivial things. No, the car didn't start, the washing machine broke down, I hit traffic, I was late, and you go on and on. And these things are actually, believe it or not, these are the things that actually cause us most of the tension in our bodies. A funny thing, funny as in odd, is that people with nervous symptoms and depression and what have you actually usually do very well when it's a real emergency. The house is on fire, or there's somebody that needs to get rescued or whatever. People like yourself often do very well in those kind of situations, but not so well on a day-to-day basis. When for most people, they understand, that there's a traffic jam and a flat tire and whatever been going on. There's been 5, 6, 7, 8 things today. The boss is in a bad mood and whatever. But they don't work themselves up into a full-blown panic attack or spiral down into an almost irretrievable depression. Yet many of you do. So what I'm going to say is this. Having started out with the most dramatic of events that we're living with, and we're dealing with these things, all of us, you need to eliminate from your thinking things that are trivial. Now, I think it was the last broadcast, I was talking about setting goals with the end in mind, meaning that we're all going to die. If Jesus doesn't return first, we're going to die. And it's just a question of when, where, and by what means. That's it. And this is, I told you, this is how I look at life. I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die. So how am I going to plan my life, especially now that I'm older, from here to the grave? I'm going to prioritize my time. But that also should, if you look at it properly, help you to realize that this is trivial. Let me give you an example. Raising children. Raising children has never been easy. It's not going to get easier. And yet some people, they especially in today's culture, they just flip, over this whole situation of raising kids. And I don't know how much more I could take. Now, I understand that. My wife and I have 5 children, and we now have 13 grandchildren. And I've been a pastor for 45 years, so I know what it's like to be dealing with people all the time, including my own family. And believe me, there's plenty of stress, and families don't matter how good they are. But if you don't put things into perspective, I mentioned putting the end in sight and working backwards as far as setting your goal, but also realizing that the great majority of things that happen in your life are not tornadoes, earthquakes, famines, pestilences, and so on. They're trivial, everyday, I got it, you got it, we all have it, type of situations and circumstances. Now, it is very important that you understand this. It really is. Otherwise, you're going to make into, the proverbial mountain out of a molehill. You're going to make into an earthquake where there's just a little bit of a rattle. Or you're going to make into a full-blown war in your home, in your marriage, or even with your children, what is basically a battle. And maybe an important battle, depending on what you're facing, but it's still only one installment of life. So if you can put things into perspective, if you can keep an eye on the end, which is meeting God, being with God, giving an account to God, it will help you. It would definitely help you to deal with life down here better. It's not going to be easy. So you have to get that straight, no matter what you do. And I want to just interject to something here real quick. All this talk about, I have a kind of a pet peeve with this success, and you're going to make more money. Well, it's okay if you make more money. That's great. But do you think if you're going to make more money that you're going to get it easy? It's just going to come easy? A lot of young people seem to think that. Let me tell you something. Nobody gets a promotion with more money that the boss doesn't expect more production out of your brain, out of your body, out of both. So what I'm trying to say is that no matter how you do it, life is stressful, and it's stressful for all of us. But the takeaway from today's lesson is that though we are dealing with very big events in the world, they kind of almost take care of themselves. That's in a manner of speaking. But the trivial things of life, you have to keep them in perspective. You have to understand that what's happening to you, the frustrations of life, is common to all of us. And with that, keep them trivial. Keep saying to yourself, and this is what I do this all the time. I'm frustrated at something, I don't know, putting something in, something falls off the counter, I'm frustrated. And I say to myself, these things happen. And it keeps me from losing my temper, getting frustrated and, whatever. I think you get the point. There are real events happening in the world signaling the coming of Christ. We pay attention to those. But the trivial things that I got them, you got them, we all got them, you don't want to work them up into, again, the Rocky Mountains when they're basically molehills. Just deal with them as molehills. I mean, molehills can still be a pain, but don't make them bigger than they are. Don't make your palpitations into a huge cardiac situation. Don't make your headaches into massive oh, I can't live with it. Can live with it. And with God's grace and help, you will live with it. So I hope that you're catching what I'm trying to say today. In any case, I'm going to pray for you. Father, help my friends. Help them understand what is truly important in life and what is not so important, not as important in life. Help them to understand the difference between major events signaling the coming of Christ and trivial events that happen to everybody, so that they don't work themselves up into a state of anxiety and depression over things that just simply happen in life. In any case, I ask you to give my friends peace, and I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so I'm glad that you could be with me today. I certainly hope. I told you when I do these broadcasts, it's a one-take deal. They come out lousy. I can't help it. I just hope that this windscreen worked. All right. Hey, listen, picking up a few subscribers here and there, and I always remind you, the fact that we have a small subscribership is to our advantage. That means you can make a comment or send me a prayer request or whatever, and I don't know if there's ever been a time when I didn't answer somebody. So subscribe if you want to be part of this group. Hit the like button. I'd appreciate it. And God willing, I'll be with you here again tomorrow on the Oasis. Until then, let the peace of Christ, peace of God, rule in your heart. God bless. See you.